Shinonji, you just have a couple of stinky bucks. Don't you think you're great just because you're rich? We don't care. Looking at Linshu throwing himself on Jokabai, I was a little dazed. My eyes met Jokabai's. 20-year-old Jokabai still had a youthful look on his face, wearing a washed-out denim jacket. However, he was born so well, with a tall and straight figure, a strong outline, and a pair of eyes like cold stars, which made his clothes look noble. I couldn't help but take a step back, holding on to the table behind me to stand firm. How long have I not seen Jokabai like this? 10 years? Or 20 years? It's been too long, I can't remember it anymore. After all, that was a thing of the last life. Jokabai was slightly startled when he saw me stepping back. Linshu was still chattering, but I couldn't hear anything. Everything in front of me was exactly the same as in the last life. That was the case at that time. He refused to ask me for financial support, but I insisted on supporting him. I have liked Jokabai for 7 years. I know that his family is not well off. His father is a gambler. He would get drunk and beat and scold him and his mother when he lost all his money. Joe's mother could not bear the torture and finally committed suicide by jumping into the river. Jokabai went out to pick up garbage and do odd jobs since he was a child, and then relied on applying for scholarships to go to school. We should not have had any intersection. However, his grades have always been good, so when he was in high school, our private middle school gave him a scholarship for the sake of the enrollment rate, so we went to the same high school. At that time, there were many young masters and young ladies in our circle. Their families were rich, but they didn't think about studying. They lived in a muddle every day, just waiting to go abroad to get a diploma and go home to inherit the family business. Only Jokabai was different. He had clear goals. He studied hard in class and went to work after class. Although he had no money, he never thought it was a shameful thing, and he was always neither humble nor arrogant. That's when I fell in love with him. I loved him, so I couldn't bear to see him suffer. At that time, I was young and ignorant, and I always self-righteously stuffed everything I thought was good into his mouth. He had to go to work at night and couldn't eat in the morning, so I brought him a lunchbox from home. Jokabai, the wagyu beef made by my nanny is the most delicious. Try it, and the foie gras, which my dad specially airlifted back, is especially delicious. At that time, I was the only daughter in the family, and I grew up spoiled. Everyone around me spoiled me, spoiling me so much that my brain was empty. I just wanted to give him the best things, but I completely ignored whether he wanted it or not. The classmates around me started to make a noise. Shinonji, what does he know about foie gras? I'm afraid he can't even afford chicken liver. I scolded them. None of your business. I didn't see Jokabai's bloodless fingers clenching the lunchbox tightly. He paused for a moment, returned the lunchbox to me, and said coldly, "Thank you for your kindness, but it's not necessary, don't." Jokabai, a boy winked. If you get together with Shinonji, you won't have to struggle in your life. Hurry up and get close to her. That's right. By then your dad can gamble as much as he wants, and he won't have to worry about your tuition anymore. Everyone laughed. I slammed the table. Shut up. Others didn't dare to laugh. Jokabai stood up all of a sudden and turned to go out. I chased him from behind and tried to stuff the lunchbox into his mouth. Jokabai, don't listen to their nonsense. Eat your meal quickly, otherwise you will have to go to work in the evening and your body will not be able to bear it. He stopped and turned back suddenly. I was stunned. There was complete hatred and disgust in his eyes. Young people always have a bad memory. I quickly forgot about that and continued to pester Jokabai. For him, I even started to study hard and went to the same university as him. My dad was so happy that he doubled my living expenses. Jokabai was even busier after going to university. His scholarship application was not approved, and his poverty subsidy quota was also taken away by classmates in the same class whose families had connections. At the worst time, he could only buy a steamed bun in the cafeteria every day and then get free soup to fill his stomach. I couldn't stand it and said I would support him, but he refused. He worked 3 jobs a day and even fainted on the road. I couldn't stand it anymore and grabbed him and insisted on giving him money. Jokabai, why don't you want my money? What are you working so hard for? I went to his class teacher and forced him to pay his tuition. At that time, I also understood a little bit and knew to take care of his self-esteem. So when I ate, I always pulled him along and said that I couldn't finish it and asked him to eat with me. When we went out to play, I always said that I got a free ticket and dragged him along. Slowly, Jokabai and I seemed to get closer and closer. I sponsored him until he graduated, and even sponsored his childhood sweetheart who grew up with him to make him happy. After graduation, Joe Kabite started his own business. His grades were always good, and he and his friends made game software when he was in school, but they ran into obstacles everywhere and couldn't get investment no matter what. I couldn't bear to see him so depressed, so I simply asked my dad to invest in him. I remember that Joe Kabite was very silent that night. When I leaned on his shoulder and almost fell asleep, he suddenly spoke, "Shinonji, why are you like this?" At that time, I thought he wanted to say, "Why are you so good to me?" So I said with a clear conscience, "Because I like you, Joe Kabite, do you like me?" I pulled his arm and acted coquettishly, "I've been so good to you, and you're not with me, you're so conscienceless." At that time, I was just joking. But Joe Kabite didn't say anything. I thought he agreed. We got together just like that. 2 years later, Joe Kabite and I got married. The wedding was hastily done. Joe Kabite said he didn't like too many people, so we only invited a few tables of close relatives and friends. They were all my relatives and friends. He was the only one on his side. Joe Kabite was still cold to me after marriage. I was really stupid at that time. I thought he was just like that, anyway. I had been chasing him for so many years. As long as I continued to treat him well, even a heart of stone would be melted by me, but I didn't expect that he really couldn't be melted, because his heart was with someone else from beginning to end. In the 3rd year after marriage, the conflict between the two of us could no longer be reconciled. I began to be unable to tolerate his coldness day after day. And I asked him if he liked his childhood sweetheart, but he just looked at me coldly without saying a word. He was so desperate that he simply slammed the door and left. I was driven more and more paranoid and crazy by his cold violence. As soon as he came back, I questioned him and scolded him. When the argument was the most intense, I said something without thinking. "If I had known you were such an ungrateful person, I might as well have raised a dog, at least it knew to wag its tail at me." His expression was ferocious for a moment, and then he quickly calmed down. Since that day, he never came home again. Later I found out that he had been with his childhood sweetheart for a long time. They had a new home outside, and even had a child. During those years, he had a happy family outside, and I was alone guarding my lonely home, and my love turned into venom soaked in hatred. Joe Kabite succeeded in starting a business, and he became richer than my father. I have nothing to take revenge on him. The only thing I have is my marriage. I gambled my life to take revenge on him. I would never divorce him. No matter how much money he gave me, he destroyed me, and I would not let him have an easy life. The woman he likes can only be a third party who is not allowed to see the light of day. His son with someone else can only be an illegitimate child in the gutter. Joe Kabite didn't dare to sue me. He was afraid that our marriage dispute would affect the company's stock price if it got out of hand, and other directors would not agree. In this way, I spent 10 years with him. No matter how hysterical and crazy I was in these 10 years, I even gave in and begged in the end. He never softened his heart and never came back to see me. I became thinner and thinner in despair day after day, and I was seriously ill. Finally, he died of depression. Shinonji. I suddenly came back to my senses and looked at Joe Kabite on the side. A deep hatred gathered from my limbs and bones, and my heart almost exploded. For a while, I could hardly stand. After I died, he finally got what he wanted, perhaps. He treated me like that because he wanted to torture me to death quickly. I still remember that my medicine was suddenly replaced before I died. When I asked the housekeeper, he just said that it was a milder medicine. I didn't doubt it, however. Not long after taking the medicine, my health began to deteriorate, and in the end I couldn't even sit up. Not long after I died. It must be him. Who else could it be except him? He hated me so much and wanted me to die immediately. He wanted Lin Chu to take the position. How vicious. I looked at Joe Kabite and forcibly suppressed the urge to rush up and kill him. I hated him so much. I believe that except for being ignorant when I was young and not taking care of his self-esteem, I have never done anything wrong to Joe Kabite. I didn't even force him to get married. I even asked him if he was willing. If not, I could continue to wait, but he hated me so much. Lin Chu yelled at me like in the last life. Shinonji, do you think you are great just because you have money? Why do you insult people like this? I looked at her. She was wearing a white dress and her figure was weak, like a little white flower. This was the woman Joe Kabite loved. The one who would help her to the top even if he had to kill me. It was the same in the last life. Joe Kabite and I were talking nicely. I told him that if he felt uncomfortable, he could return the tuition to me when he made money in the future, and I would consider it as a loan from him. But But Lin Chu suddenly accused me of using money to attack people and insulted Zhou Kebai. Later, I gradually understood it in the quarrel with Zhou Kebai. It turned out that he always thought that I was using money to attack him and humiliated him. I suddenly felt very ridiculous, looking at Lin Chu's protective look. I curled my lips. You think too much. Even if I burn this money, I won't support you. Zhou Kebai's face changed drastically. Lin Chu's expression was blank for a moment. What did you say? I smiled. Don't you think that I am insulting you by supporting you? We are all classmates. How can I insult you like this, if that's the case? Forget it, you should continue to work. Lin Chu's family situation is similar to Zhou Kebai's. Her father ran away with the money due to foreign debts, and her mother worked to support her studies and got sick. Now she can only lie at home, probably because of the similar situation. She has always had a good relationship with Zhou Kebai and always stays around him. She always likes to pester Zhou Kebai to go with me when I go out to play, sometimes when I don't want to. She will hide behind him and ask me pitifully, Sister Nanji, do you think I'm poor and don't want to make friends with me? Before I can say anything, Zhou Kebai will protect her behind him and say in a deep voice, if you think we are not worthy, then don't go, I can only take her with me. She was there when we had dinner. She would tilt her head and look at the lobster on the plate and say, do you eat such delicious food every day? Then she said with a lonely and envious tone. We are really not from the same world. There were several times when Zhou Kebai and I were chatting well, but she suddenly said this, and Zhou Kebai's expression lost his smile and stopped talking to me. At first I thought she was just unintentional, until later, when Zhou Kebai and I were walking together. I suddenly turned back to say something to him, but I caught her looking at me. Lin Chu had a blank expression, and her eyes were full of viciousness and resentment, seeing me turn around. She was a little caught off guard and quickly forced a smile, but I felt a chill on my spine. It was then that I suddenly realized, she hates me, or rather, she hates me. In fact, when Zhou Kebai and I just got married, there was a short period of harmony. At that time, his company was on the right track and got the first order. After the celebration banquet, he drunkenly hugged me and said to me with a smile, wife, what do you like? Your husband will buy it for you. I felt sorry for him because it was not easy for him to make money, and I was satisfied hugging him. No need, I am very happy that you have this heart, but he refused to give in, and said with his neck stiff, husbands make money for their wives. I will buy you a bag. What bag do you like? Until he fell asleep, he was still mumbling, Nanji, I have money now, you don't have to suffer with me. Sure enough, he bought me a bag the next day, but before I could say anything, Lin Chu followed me. She looked at the bag in my hand, and her expression suddenly became a little strange. Then she pulled the bag from my hand and said to Zhou Kebai with a smile, oh, I remember that Nanji had this bag when she was in college. It was given by a boy who liked her at that time. She thought it was too cheap and couldn't carry it out. In fact, I have long forgotten whether this happened or not. However, Zhou Kebai's expression suddenly became ugly. Then he took the bag and went out with a blank expression. After that, he began to be cold to me, and the bag was already on Lin Chu's back when we met again. She smiled and pretended to be indifferent. Sister Nanji, Kebai gave me this bag. You won't be angry, right? I naturally refused and asked her to return the bag to me. She looked panicked and asked me with red eyes, you have so many bags anyway. Why do you have to fight with me for this one? You have so many. I only have this one. Zhou Kebai pulled me away with a dark face. Let go, since you don't want it. Why do you fight with her? Or do you just like things that you fight for? I was arrogant at the time. How could I stand such anger? And I had a big quarrel with him and left unhappily. Later I understood. Lin Chu was not talking about the bag. She was clearly talking about Zhou Kebai. She thought I stole him away. So she hated me so much? Nanji, Zhou Kebai grabbed me in a panic. Wait a minute. I turned around, but was stunned for a moment when I saw his expression. There was an undercurrent of emotion in his eyes, as if something was about to burst out of the ground. Even his voice was trembling. No, it shouldn't be like this. Shin Nanji, why don't you support me anymore? Don't you like me very much? I was shocked by his madness. What's wrong with Zhou Kebai? Is he crazy? Or is he angry that I spoke to Lin Chu in a bad tone? But I hadn't caught up with him at this time in my previous life, and he was always very indifferent to me and didn't smile. Is he sick? I wanted to pull my hand back, let go, but he pulled harder, and even his eyes were a little red. Shin Nanji, don't you like me anymore? Don't you want me anymore? I was really scared this time. When did Zhou Kebai say this to me? I opened my eyes wide. Zhou Kebai, did you take the wrong medicine or are you possessed? but he didn't say anything, just stared at me without blinking, his expression paranoid and crazy. I was irritated. He treated me like that in his last life, and he dared to stare at me now. Don't you think that my sponsorship of you is an insult to you, Joe Kabai, or are you just being shameless and asking me to beg you? Lin Shu opened his mouth, as if he didn't expect me to talk to Joe Kabai like this. Yes. This was the time when I liked him the most in my last life. Every word I said was cautious, for fear of hurting his self-esteem, but now I don't care. Joe Kabai, who are you? I said contemptuously, a wolf's heart, repaying kindness with hatred. I wonder why I liked this kind of person before. Joe Kabai was surprisingly not angry, but the blood on his face disappeared completely, and he looked miserable. Bye. I shook off his hand and left without looking back. There was 200,000 yuan in the card given to Joe Kabai, enough to cover his tuition and living expenses. I took the card and went directly to the mall. I gave him the money and got a lot of money, so I might as well buy more bags. In my previous life, Joe Kabai never gave me anything except that one bag. Birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, he could never remember them, or he didn't care. On the contrary, Lin Shu suddenly became a rich lady. She used Joe Kabai's money to go shopping everywhere, buying bags, watches, and clothes for hundreds of thousands. Every time she bought something, she would come to me to show off. Sister Nanji, this is what Kabai brought me when he went to Paris. What did he bring you? No. She covered her mouth and chuckled. He didn't bring you anything. Then I had a big fight with Joe Kabai, and our relationship became worse. Now think about it. I am so rich. Why should I care about things bought by men? I can buy whatever I want myself. I bought 4 bags with the 200,000 yuan and added 100,000 yuan on the way back to school. I don't know if it was because of a narrow road for enemies. I saw Lin Shu and Joe Kabai as soon as I got off the car. When she saw the luxury bags in my hands, her eyes changed suddenly, and she was jealous and jealous. At this time, Joe Kabai was still penniless, and she was also a pauper. The white skirt on her body was frayed from washing, although she had tried her best to cut off the threads and iron it flat. She could tell at a glance that it was a cheap item sold at a roadside stall. Sister Nanji, you are really rich. I found that Lin Shu changed her face very quickly. Just now she called me Shin Nanji and scolded me for having too stinky money. What's the big deal? Now she can call me Sister Nanji. She stared at the Chanel bag in my hand. Her fingers clenched tightly. Chanel bags are expensive, right? One is enough for several years of our tuition. She approached Joe Kabai and said to him intentionally or unintentionally, we are really not from the same world. I used to defend myself when she said that. I am not good at talking, and the more I talk to Joe Kabai, the angrier he gets. Now you can fuck him. I smiled slightly. It seems that you are not only poor, but also have a bad brain. Do you know it now? I live in a 300 square meter large flat in the city center, and you live in a 30 square meter old and dilapidated house at the junction of urban and rural areas. Of course, we are not from the same world. Lin Chu's face turned green, and his facial features were distorted for a moment. I walked over and said to her word by word, Lin Chu, you will never be from the same world as me. You will be jealous to death. Kabai. She reacted quickly and pretended to be pitiful to Joe Kabai. I sneered. What else can you do besides hiding behind a man like a stink bug in the gutter? You don't need to look for Joe Kabai. You two are the same, both equally disgusting. After scolding the couple that day, I went home happily. It's not that I don't want to take revenge on them. I always remember that they drugged me in my last life. But one thing is that the drugging in this life has not happened after all. I have no evidence. Another thing is that I don't want to sacrifice my life for such garbage. It was too painful to be tortured in my last life. In this life, I want to stay away from this couple, whether they are good or bad. It has nothing to do with me. A new life. I want to start over. However, I want to stay away from them, but they are still haunting me. A few days later, my friend came to me and gloated, you didn't give Joe Kabai and Lin Chu money, and now they're in a terrible state and can't even pay their tuition. I heard that Joe Kabai is working like crazy outside now. Lin Chu wanted to buy a new skirt that day, but she only had 80 yuan. She used WeChat, Alipay and credit cards, but couldn't get enough. She even sold the iPhone you bought for her before to barely get enough tuition. It took me a long time to recall that before this in my previous life, I saw that Joe Kabai's phone was too old, so I gave him the latest iPhone. However, I saw that phone in Lin Chu's hand the next day. I lowered my eyes and said sarcastically, really, that's really poor. As a result, I was stopped by Lin Chu before I took 2 steps. She was very excited, and she held me and said angrily, "Shinonji, why don't you support Kubai? Do you know that his GPA is the first in his major? If he is delayed because of tuition, can you bear the responsibility?" I was stunned at first, and then I was so angry that I laughed. In my previous life, I figured out what kind of people these people are. They want other people's money, but they can't lose face, they curse while eating, they are so shameless. What does it have to do with me whether he is the first or not? I spread my hands. I'm not his father. How can you say that? Some classmates who knew us gathered around, and Lin Chu became more excited. Tears even came out of his eyes, and he looked like a little white flower who would not bow to evil forces. Your bag can cover our tuition fees for several years. What's wrong with you helping us? Or are you so selfish that you would rather waste the money than help those in need? She probably thought that everyone was Joe Kabai and would be brainwashed by her shameless remarks. Before I spoke, my friend spoke first. She and I were in similar conditions. But her temper was much more violent than mine. She sneered at Lin Chu and said, "Which mental hospital didn't close the door properly and let you, a fool, out? If you want money, you can go begging. If you're not good enough, you can sell it. Although you're a little ugly, there will definitely be people who want 80 yuan for one time, 800 yuan for 10 times, and the tuition fees will be paid for 100 times. You have arms, legs, kidneys, and genitals. Why do you have to be so shameless to ask others for money? Are they your father?" Lin Chu has always been a green tea girl. I've never seen someone so reckless and scolding. I was stunned for a while and couldn't speak. Other students also spoke up.
Yeah.
If you don't have money, you can apply for a scholarship. Why are you so rude when asking for money? You are so shameless, you deserve to be poor. Lin Chu took a step back and opened his eyes in disbelief. I sneered. I treated my classmates to milk tea every other day and was willing to pay for dinner parties. Of course, my classmates spoke to me. Now that I think about it, what else does Lin Chu have besides Joe Kabai? There is nothing she can do to win me over. If I hadn't been possessed by a demon in my previous life and my heart and eyes were full of Joe Kabai, people like her would not even appear in my life. Just then, Joe Kabai suddenly came. "Kabai," Lin Chu leaned over as if she had found a savior, tears in her eyes trembling. "I just asked Shinonji to help you. She has money to buy so many bags, but she is unwilling to help you. I don't know where I offended her. She scolded me so badly, Sister Nanji." She immediately changed her face and was about to cry. "I know you look down on me, but I am doing this for Kabai's good. He is so outstanding." I was extremely annoyed. Lin Chu was like a toad that jumped on someone's feet, not biting but annoying. The most hateful thing is that she is a ghost that lingers and can't be shaken off. Joe Kabai frowned slightly. "Did you scold her?" I couldn't help but laugh sarcastically. Sure enough, he is always like this. As soon as Lin Chu pretended to be pitiful, he immediately scolded me for her without knowing the truth. In the past, I was angry and sad every time, jumping up and down to argue with him and then crying secretly in the room, but now I won't do that. I raised my eyelids and looked at Joe Kabai. Yes, she is right, I did scold her. However, to my surprise, Joe Kabai was not angry. He lowered his head and said in a gentle tone, almost flattering, "It must be that she did something wrong and made you angry." Then he turned his head and said to Lin Chu lightly, "Nanji is not an unreasonable person, you should apologize to her." I was dumbfounded, and for a moment I thought I was still asleep. Lin Chu was also dumbfounded, and after a long time, his lips trembled slightly. "Kabai, what did you say?" Joe Kabai's face turned cold. "I asked you to apologize." Lin Chu's eyes turned red, and he took a step back in disbelief. She gritted her teeth and cried, "How could you do this?" I was also confused. Joe Kabai actually asked Lin Chu, the apple of his eye, to apologize to me. Did he get kicked in the head by a donkey? A brief thought flashed through my mind. Could it be he was also reborn? But I dismissed the idea immediately. It's impossible. In his previous life, Joe Kabai hated me so much that he even drugged me to death. If he was reborn, he would definitely stay away from me at the first opportunity. He must have some other conspiracy. I pulled away and looked at him warily. Joe Kabai seemed to be stabbed by my eyes and looked at me hurt. "Nanji, I know I was wrong before. Can you forgive me? Don't you like me? Let's be together, okay? I will make up for what I owed you before." He became more and more emotional as he spoke, and in the end he stared at me, as if he was looking at a lost treasure, and his voice was choked with sobs. This is ridiculous. I couldn't help but clench my fist. In my last life, I pursued him hard and spent my whole life just for this sentence from him. It's a pity that I never heard him say that he liked me until I died. In this life, I really scolded and humiliated him as he said, and he said he liked me, then what was all the efforts I made in my last life? I pulled a sarcastic smile at the corner of my mouth and said with disgust, "Be with me, Joe Kabai? Who are you? Are you worthy of being with me? One piece of clothing on me is enough for you to work for 3 years. You are too self-righteous. Why do you want to be with me? Doesn't he think I humiliated him? Then let him feel the real humiliation." Sure enough, Joe Kabai's face turned pale. He said anxiously, "I don't have money now, but can you wait for me? I will have money in the future." He was right about this. He will be rich in the future, but what does it have to do with me? I could hardly suppress the hatred and disgust in my heart. I looked at him and said contemptuously, "Joe Kabai. Even if all the men in the world died, I would not be with you." After I left that day, Joe Kabai kept staring at me in a daze. He looked extremely pitiful, his shoulders seemed to collapse a little, and he stood there, as if his soul had been taken away. I could only sneer in my heart. I didn't know what Joe Kabai was up to. Maybe he suddenly came to his senses, or maybe he was mentally ill. The Shinonji who loved him with all her might had died in the previous life. I only hate him in this life. Without my support, Joe Kabai and Lin Chu lived a more miserable life in this life than in the previous life. Joe Kabai's program was not sold, and his self-employment failed. I heard that they are now so poor that they are about to sell blood. However, this is not what I care about. Early the next morning, my cell phone rang. I picked up the phone, and the name on the screen was Chen Luo. This is my former friend. I was a little dazed. For me, I haven't seen these names for more than 10 years, when I was with Joe Kabai before. He didn't like my second-generation friends, and always forbade me to associate with them. Gradually, I lost touch with them. This Chen Luo is the one who gave me the bag mentioned by Lin Chu. Our two families are old friends and have had a good relationship since childhood. I picked up the phone and heard his excited voice. "Nanji, I heard that you scolded Joe Kabai." Before I could say anything, he said excitedly, "You should have taught him a lesson. This idiot is eating soft rice and puau. We didn't dare to say it before." "You finally woke up." I smiled slightly. "What's the matter?" "Tonight's party. Still the same place, 8 o'clock, must be there." After hanging up the phone, I thought for a long time before I remembered that the old place was a bar we used to go to. We used to hang out together, but after I got together with Joe Kabai, I rarely went out. I was originally a domineering person, but I completely gave up for love. I stopped going to the mall and learned to go shopping at street stalls and markets for the first time. I stopped wearing those luxury goods and carefully selected clothes worth dozens of dollars, just so that Joe Kabai would no longer frown when I stood next to him. I didn't dare to eat at the restaurant I used to go to. When I went out to eat occasionally, I would just go to Shaxian Snacks with him to eat a portion of steamed buns. I lived my life like a timid and cautious person. I just hoped that he would like me more. I used to love him so wholeheartedly. When we arrived at the bar at night, Chen Luo was very happy and kept urging me to drink. I didn't refuse and enjoyed this long-lost relaxation. This group of friends are actually very good, especially Chen Luo. When I got married before, he told me that if I was wronged, I could go to him and he would help me teach Joe Kabai a lesson. Later, he really went to find Joe Kabai. At that time, I had just gotten pregnant. The child was an accident. When Joe Kabai came back drunk, I was full of joy, thinking that having a child would win back his heart. But later, Lin Chu knew that I was pregnant. She deliberately ran to my house to provoke me. When I couldn't bear it anymore and wanted to slap her, Joe Kabai came back. He grabbed my wrist and pushed me away subconsciously. I was pushed down by him, and my stomach hit the corner of the table. I saw blood on the spot and was rushed to the hospital. I was young and healthy at that time, and I was not as exhausted as I was later. The child was saved in the end. Then Lin Chu was relentless. She came to my house every day to scold me, and even deliberately called me at 2 or 3 in the middle of the night to listen to her and Joe Kabai's intimate voice. Joe Kabai panted and called her softly, "Relax." My stomach was churning, and I covered my mouth and ran to the bathroom, vomiting all over. I vomited until tears mixed with gastric juice came out. In the end, I felt cold all over and shivered constantly. I looked up, and the woman in the mirror was so pale that she seemed to fall down at any time, with only a pair of lifeless eyes full of red bloodshot. Tears filled my face. That day I completely lost the child. The doctor told me to take good care of myself and not to get emotional, but I couldn't control myself. After Joe Kabai knew that the child was gone, he was silent for a long time and only said one sentence: "There will be children in the future." But I didn't have any more children. He and Lin Chu did have children. Happy family. After Chen Luo knew about this, he came to Jokabai's house and beat him to death. If I hadn't stopped him in the end, he would have beaten Jokabai to death. I pulled him, his eyes were red, and he yelled at Jokabai crazily. What did you say when we got married? You said you would treat her well, she was such a cheerful person. How could you treat her like this? Jokabai didn't fight back that time. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and lowered his head without saying a word. What are you thinking about? Chenluo pushed me. Drink. I clinked glasses with him and drank it all. After 3 rounds of drinking, Chenluo's face was flushed. He leaned close to me and asked in a low voice. You really don't like that Jokabai? I glanced at him, and his eyes immediately dodged, and his ears turned pink. I felt a little funny. Chenluo likes me, I know, but in my previous life, I only had Jokabai in my eyes, and I even had a falling out with him because of Jokabai. But when Jokabai treated me badly, he would immediately stand up to defend me. If I have to find someone in this life, I hope to find someone like him. Now I understand that sometimes love can't solve all problems. Jokabai and I have different backgrounds, different educations, and different conditions since childhood. We are not a good match. He grew up in such a family, and he has a lot of thorns on his body, is sharp and sensitive, and has low self-esteem and indifference. I was spoiled since I was a child, and my family has always been very good. The court gave me the confidence to give up everything to love someone, and this also became the cause of my tragedy. I thought that love was enough, but I didn't know that people like Jokabai could not be melted by passion. I nodded. Yes, I was blind before. Chenluo lowered his head, slowly approached me, and whispered, then look at me. Before he finished speaking, someone suddenly grabbed my wrist and pulled me up. I was startled, and when I turned around, I saw Jokabai's ugly face. He lowered his eyes, his body was tightly tensed, and his calm voice suppressed the emotions that I couldn't understand. Come with me. I was almost dragged out of the door by him. Let go. I pushed him away desperately. Are you sick? But Jokabai clamped me tightly, with terrifying force, since rebirth. His attitude towards me has always been docile and almost flattering. At this time, his eyes were dark, and there was no expression on his face, which was a bit scary. He said in a hoarse voice, Shinonji, what did you say just now? I was stunned, then gritted my teeth and said, I said I don't like you anymore. I was blind before. Don't like me anymore. Jokabai laughed strangely. Then he grabbed me and stared at me. His voice was as cold as ice. Say it again. I was frightened by him for a moment. You said before that you like me, that you want to be with me, that you will never leave me. Are they all false? He looked crazy, but I was stunned. No, I haven't said these words in this life. These words were clearly said before I married him in my previous life. I couldn't stop shaking all over. How could he know? Jokabai soon realized that he had said the wrong thing, and subconsciously took a step back. I whispered, Jokabai, you are back too, right? He was silent. The midnight wind whistled past me, dragging the fallen leaves on the ground with the wind, carrying the desolation. Occasionally a car passed by, the light flashed by and quickly disappeared into the dimness. Jokabai, I forced an ugly smile. How dare you? He was actually reborn. He treated me like that in his last life. How dare he say such words to me in this life? I said so and did so in my last life, but what was the result? I died with my eyes open. In this life, I finally thought it through and wanted to live a good life, but he actually tore my wounds open again, mocking me and telling me that I would never get rid of those miserable days. Jokabai was a little flustered. Nanji, listen to my explanation. I was also reborn, but I have figured it out now. In my previous life, I was such a jerk. I didn't realize that I had already fallen in love with you. I will make it up to you in the future, okay? Jokabai turned his head away. I spoke word by word. Jokabai, how dare you? How dare he tell me so casually that he had already fallen in love with me after hurting me like this? This slap in the face vented all the hatred in my heart. Using 100% of my strength, the corners of his mouth were cracked and bleeding, but he just wiped it casually, speaking calmly, is that enough, if you don't feel better? He grabbed my hand and pressed it against his face. Slap a few more times. Even though he was saying harsh words, his eyes suddenly turned red, and tears fell straight down. I was a little shocked. Jokabai has never cried in front of me. In his most difficult time in his previous life, his father lost all the money he had saved for school fees and gambling, and beat him up when he got home. He didn't cry when he went to school the next day with bruises all over his body. He worked 3 jobs a day, and fainted several times from hunger and exhaustion, but he didn't cry at that time. I once thought that this person was born with a heart of stone, but I didn't expect that he would cry in front of me. Joe Kabai's tears diluted the blood at the corner of his mouth. He looked so miserable that he seemed to be unable to suppress it. He hunched over and begged, "Nanji, come back. If you hate me, you can kill me if you want, just don't leave me." I was almost driven crazy. "Joe Kabai, did your brain get stuck in the door? What's wrong with you?" He lowered his head and trembled. I was too inferior. I was on guard at that time and felt that everyone was trying to hurt me. I didn't dare to like you. And I didn't dare to believe that you really liked me. I was afraid that after I accepted it with joy, you would suddenly tell me one day that I was not worthy of you and you were just playing around. Shinanji, I'm an idiot. I deserve to die. It doesn't matter if you hit me or scold me. I beg you to come back," he cried, as if he wanted to vent all the suppressed emotions. "You don't know how I got through those years after you left. I couldn't help it anymore," and sneered. "Joe Kabai, didn't you love Lin Chu in the last life? You drugged me and poisoned me to death for Lin Chu, didn't you?" "Drug?" Joe Kabai paused. "What drug? Are you still pretending not to know?" I held on to the railings on the side of the road tightly, otherwise I couldn't guarantee that I wouldn't slap him again. My medicine was replaced by someone else. My health had obviously improved at the beginning, but later it got worse and worse, and finally, I bit my tongue tightly, and my mouth was full of bitterness. The man I love killed me for another woman. Even if I just say it again, it makes me feel miserable. "I didn't," Joe Kabai said anxiously. "I never did. I also told the housekeeper to take good care of you. How could I kill you?" We looked at each other and saw the realization in each other's eyes. If it wasn't him, then the only housekeeper I could contact was the one who also wanted me dead. Only Lin Chu. It turned out that it was Lin Chu who killed me. I felt mixed emotions, but it was not difficult to accept. I'm dead. Does it matter who killed me? Even if it wasn't Joe Kabai, Lin Chu killed me for him, and he couldn't be separated from me. I was a little disheartened, and an unspeakable fatigue spread throughout my body. Love or hate, I'm really tired. In this life, I just want to stay away from him and live a good life. The autumn rain came unexpectedly, and the raindrops fell on the ground. Joe Kabai stood in the rain in a mess, and I didn't know whether it was rain or tears on his face. "Nanji, please, what about Lin Chu?" I had no expression. "You both had children in your previous life. What do you say?" Joe Kabai was speechless. After a long time, he said with difficulty, "She got me drunk. We only had that one time." I gave a sarcastic laugh and said nothing. Joe Kabai lowered his head even more. "From the beginning to the end, I only like you. I have never liked Lin Chu," he continued. Just then, a female voice suddenly sounded in the darkness on the street. "Then what am I?" Lin Chu walked out of the shadows. She was still wearing the old white dress, which was wet by the rain and stuck to her body. Joe Kabai. She didn't have any expression, but her eyes flashed with madness. "You like her. So what am I? I have been with you all these years. So what is it?" Joe Kabai clenched his fists tightly, and the look he gave her was no longer as gentle as usual. "Only hatred. It seems that Lin Chu has not been reborn, and is still the Lin Chu of the previous life. She didn't poison me now, and I have no place to take revenge." Joe Kabai also understood and said nothing. Lin Chu was stunned. "You hate me? Joe Kabai, you actually hate me. If you hadn't been trying to sow discord between me and Nanji, we wouldn't have come to this point." His tone was cold. "I'm trying to sow discord?" Lin Chu laughed. "Joe Kabai, she simply stopped pretending. If you weren't so inferior and conceited, how could I have sown discord? You are the one with a dark mind, wanting her but afraid, and now you're putting it on me." Veins popped out on Joe Kabai's forehead. "Shin Nanji." Lin Chu tilted his head, his expression innocent and puzzled, as if he was just asking an insignificant question. "You obviously have everything. Why do you want to snatch Joe Kabai from me?" She didn't seem to need my answer, and talked to herself. "You have a good family background and good looks. Everyone surrounds you, loves you, and pampers you. They will bring you what you want, and you don't even need to ask. So many people like you. Why do you want to snatch Joe Kabai from me?" Her voice was trembling with a bit of gritting her teeth. "I only have him. Why do I only have this one person, and you still want to snatch him away? Obviously you already have so many," I said calmly. "Joe Kabai is a person. Who he likes is his choice. I can't force him. Besides, I have never won. I lost completely." "Really?" Lin Chu approached me, and I saw clearly that she had one hand behind her back. An ominous premonition suddenly emerged. Just as I was about to step back, she suddenly pulled out a dagger and rushed towards me. "Go to hell." Her face was twisted and she looked crazy. As long as you die, Joe Kabai will still be mine. Shinonji, why are you so happy? You deserve to die. She was too close. And I didn't have time to dodge. Her dilated pupils reflected her bloodshot eyes. At this moment, a huge force pushed me away. The sound of the blade entering the flesh was covered by the sound of rain, and Lin Chu was stunned looking at Joe Kabai in front of him. Her fingers holding the dagger began to tremble, and she said in panic, "Kabai." I staggered back, and the knife had penetrated Joe Kabai's abdomen. The oozing blood was washed into a light pink by the rain. He didn't seem to notice it. Just smiled and looked at me. "I'm glad you're okay." When he was sent to the hospital, Joe Kabai had completely fainted. He lost too much blood and went directly to the ICU for rescue. Lin Chu was also taken away by the police who rushed over. On the third day, Joe Kabai didn't wake up. I walked into the ward and looked at him. I felt like there were a lot of words stuck in my throat, but I couldn't say a word. He looked very weak, his face was as pale as paper. But he still managed to smile with difficulty. "Nanji, you're fine." I had mixed emotions. "Why did you block that knife for me?" He lowered his eyelashes. "I don't know. I just don't want you to get hurt." Lin Chu's knife was aimed at my heart. Luckily, Joe Kabai was tall and didn't hurt the vital parts. "What are you going to do?" I suddenly asked. Joe Kabai quickly understood what I meant and smiled bitterly. "Just do what you have to do, tell the truth. That was your real wife in your last life, who gave birth to your child." I sat down on the other bed. He whispered, "But she killed you." I was silent. Joe Kabai coughed a few times, and his facial features were distorted for a moment in pain. Then he said in a hoarse voice, "Nanji, I really know I was wrong. I was so wrong before. If I say," his voice choked up, and his lips trembled, "if I can change, are you willing?" "No." I interrupted him, "You saved me. But I died because of you in my last life. We are even at best. Even if you blocked a knife for me, it can't erase the harm you have done to me." His eyes were red, and he gritted his teeth to suppress his tears. "But Nanji, you once said that you will love me forever." I suddenly felt a little tired and smiled bitterly. "Joe Kabai, love will be consumed. You spent 10 years to wear out my love bit by bit." Joe Kabai's face was pale and at a loss. "Shinonji, you can't do this. You said you loved me first." Before turning around and leaving, I looked back for the last time. Joe Kabai had lost a lot of weight, and the hospital gown was loose on him. His eyes and eyebrows are still the same as the boy I once loved, but his soul has grown old. Maybe we loved each other, but the time was wrong. "But now," I whispered, "Joe Kabai, I really don't love you anymore." After leaving the ward, I could still hear him crying desperately. "But Shinonji, what should I do? Why did I come back again? To hear you say that you don't love me anymore? Then I might as well die in my last life." I lowered my head, my eyes dry. I can't cry anymore, because those tears had already dried up in my last life. I strode away, leaving those wails behind. In the end, I could no longer hear them. Joe Kabai did not protect Lin Chu. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison for attempted murder. The school also expelled her. I heard that her mother couldn't stand the blow and committed suicide by jumping off the building. I didn't go to the trial that day. In fact, I have figured out why Lin Chu hates me so much. Rather than saying it's for Joe Kabai, it's better to say that she is jealous of me. She is jealous of me for having everything, so she tried every means to snatch Joe Kabai away to show that she can also beat me. When she found out that she even lost Joe Kabai, she went completely crazy. I heard that she went completely crazy after knowing the news of her mother's death. She was unconscious and even insulted the judge during the sentencing. Of course, I asked someone to pass the news of death to her. I also told my father and asked him to find someone to take good care of Lin Chu in prison. I always remember the drugging in my previous life. She will pay me back after all. 3 years later, I married Chen Luo. Chen Luo's family attached great importance to this wedding and held a big banquet. All the important people in the city were invited. The scene was very grand. Just when we were about to go on stage, his secretary suddenly ran over with a red envelope. There was nothing written on it. "Mr. Chen, look at this red envelope. There is a check for 2 million. I have verified that it is real, but there is no name on it." He frowned and said, "What should I do?" Chen Luo and I looked at each other and guessed who gave it to me. Joe Kabai is indeed capable. Even if he failed in his first business venture, he quickly started over again and finally succeeded. He smiled and said, "Okay, since someone is rushing to give you money, just accept it." At this moment, my cell phone suddenly rang. It was a text message. It was from an unfamiliar number, with only one sentence without a beginning or an end. "If he treats you badly, come back." I will wait for you forever, Chenluo sneered. Then he will wait, and he won't be able to wait in the next life. I deleted the text message in front of him and blocked the number. Let's go. I held his arm and smiled slightly. They are all waiting for us. Those sad, tearful nights will eventually pass. And I will never look back again. Shokabai's perspective. When I saw Shinonji again, I was stunned. She was 20 years old in front of me. Her face was full of vitality, so lively. Not like the decadent in my memory. I have forgotten how long I haven't seen her. I couldn't move my eyes away, staring at her greedily. I haven't seen Shinonji for a long, long time. When the housekeeper said she was dead in my previous life, I didn't believe it. Until I went back and saw her cold body. It was strange that I didn't feel anything at that moment. Everything around disappeared. I couldn't see or hear anything for a few seconds. It wasn't until they hurriedly helped me up that I realized that I had fallen just now. I asked the housekeeper calmly, "Did she leave any words?" The housekeeper shook his head. "Madam didn't say anything." "Oh, it turned out that she didn't leave a single word for me." "Yes. We have said everything we should say. When she loved me when we were young, she said all kinds of sweet words. Later, we turned against each other and dragged out all the pain points of each other and whipped the corpses. She cursed me for dying a miserable death. And I cursed her for being so lowly. What else is there to say? Good and bad. There is nothing to say." It was at this time that I suddenly felt a dull pain coming from my heart. The pain was fine and dense at first, not very sharp. But soon it drilled holes everywhere viciously, and my heart seemed to beta clothes were full of holes. And the pain was so severe that I had to kneel down to resist. I looked at Shinonji. She was lying quietly on the bed, without any reaction. If she had seen me like this before, she would have come to care about me even when we were arguing the most fiercely. She has always been so stupid, but this time, she didn't even want to look at me. That's right, she is dead. Completely dead. She will never appear in front of me again. I thought so, but I was not sad. I just felt like I was thinking about other people's problems. My body and brain had become another person, separating my heart from the pain. What should I do? It will really cause trouble for me, I thought. I have a meeting tomorrow. This will be delayed. After all, I have to hold her funeral. My throat suddenly felt a little itchy. I coughed a few times, but saw the housekeeper's horrified eyes. He said in a panic, "Sir." I lowered my head and saw the scarlet dots on my chest. Whose blood is this? I was a little puzzled. Then the itch in my throat became more and more unbearable, and I suddenly spit out a mouthful of blood. The housekeeper was so anxious that he dragged me to the hospital, and there was only one thought left in my mind. Oh, it turned out that this was my blood. After Shinonji died, I didn't cry. I even went home to pack up my things. She didn't have much stuff. She used to be such a luxury person. But now her house was empty, and she only had a few pieces of clothes from unknown brands. It's good. I think, we have been entangled for so long, and finally it can end. Until I opened the cabinet and saw a cabinet of medicinal oil. I had a car accident when I was working as a delivery man before, and my legs were injured. It hurt so much when it was cloudy and rainy. This medicinal oil was specially made by someone she had found at that time. I laughed at her for buying so much, and she smiled and said, "What if I don't have it in the future?" Unfortunately, I seldom went home after marriage, and every time I came back, there were quarrels. I only used these medicinal oils a few times, less than half a bottle. Then I suddenly remembered that we had a good time. I also thought she was cute, but in the endless quarrels and negotiations, we were only left with hateful faces. I suddenly felt a little wet and hot on my face, reached out and touched it. It turned out that I didn't know when. I had already burst into tears. After Shinonji died, I didn't forget her as quickly as I thought. Instead, she appeared in my dreams day and night, as if she wanted to torture me deliberately. Sometimes when I was young, she blushed and handed me the lunchbox. "Jokabai, this is the wagyu beef made by my nanny. It's the most delicious." Strange, at that time, I just thought she was arrogant and full of annoyance. Now I suddenly found that her red face was actually very cute. Later I learned that the wagyu cubes were her favorite dish. She wanted to share her favorite things with me, with all her sincerity, but at that time, I was not worthy of such precious love at all. The inferiority complex of the teenager was too sensitive, and it erected sharp thorns all over its body to pierce every person who tried to get close. Shinonji had a good family and was beautiful. So many people liked her. I couldn't believe that she would like someone like me who was useless. There were too many tricks of rich people. She must be playing tricks on me, so I treated her worse and worse. I wanted her to leave. She was a rare species that had never appeared in my barren and dark world. disrupting my entire biosphere and making me at a loss, but I also wanted to confirm her love for me again and again in a despicable way when she refused to retreat. How sad, how hateful. After marriage, our relationship seemed to be better, but Lin Chu kept reminding me that she and we would never be from the same world. She was right. The bag I bought her with great enthusiasm for the first time when I got the money was actually just an out-of-season item that her suitor had given her when she was in college. What was there about me that was worthy of her love? At that time, I didn't understand my feelings. I thought I really hated her, but I couldn't help getting close to her. I kept bringing Lin Chu to appear in front of her, and when I saw her hurt expression, I sucked that trace of affection morbidly. Look, she cares about me. Later, she changed again in my dream. She was lying on the hospital bed, holding a child whose face could not be seen clearly, crying desperately. She said, "Jokabai, give me my child back." Then I woke up suddenly and couldn't sleep at night. This happened day after day. Sometimes I was happy and sometimes I was scared. I had to go to the master. I asked the master, "Master, does she have any obsessions that she can't let go of? Do I need to perform a ritual to help her transcend?" The master looked at me for a long time and sighed. Donor. He clasped his hands together and said compassionately, "It's not her that can't be let go." That day I sat on the mountain for a long time before I figured it out. It turned out that it was me who couldn't let go. It turned out that I had already fallen in love with her. In the 3rd year after Shinanji's death, I began to gradually become crazy. I didn't care about Lin Chu and the child at all, no matter how crazy she was. I just said coldly, "You insisted on having this child. It has nothing to do with me." On Shinanji's birthday, I took 2 bottles of sleeping pills mixed with wine, to make sure it was thorough. I also cut my wrist. The unbearable pain gradually became numb. A breeze suddenly blew in front of my eyes. The sun was very warm, and the sound of birds rang in my ears. My hand was suddenly grasped softly. Turning my head, the smiling face of 20-year-old Shinanji came into my sight. "Jokabai." She complained with a smile, "Why did you take so long to come?" I looked at her for a long time, and my eyes gradually became wet and hot. Then I slowly turned around and hugged her, more and more tightly. She was startled by me and pushed me. "What are you doing? You hurt me." Then she hugged me back and chuckled. "What's wrong with you? Do you miss me?" My voice was filled with tears. "Yes, Shinanji, I miss you so much. How long have I not seen Jokabai like this?" And now, is better than hearing her say that she doesn't love me anymore. At that moment, I realized that even if thousands of arrows pierced my heart, it would be nothing more than this. I lay on the bed, crying my heart out. In that case, why did you let me come back? I thought I could win her back and reverse our tragedy. But I didn't expect that I would lose her completely. My heart hurt so much that I couldn't breathe. I cried and laughed. I felt like I was crazy, but I also felt that I was more sober than ever. I clearly understood. It turned out that my rebirth was just to atone for my sins. It was to experience all the suffering she had endured again. Death is not a real departure. Now, she has really left me completely, and for the rest of my life, I will live in this endless despair, unable to break free.